My name is Alex Carlin, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and I'm going to be the moderator here tonight. So I'm glad everyone's here, and what we're going to do is go through a little bit of introduction and explanation of the ground rules for this evening's talk, and then we'll have the candidates deal with opening statements and questions. So, this forum is being conducted by the League of Women Voters, and it's sponsored by the Morro Bay Chamber of Commerce, whose president, Erica Crawford, is here tonight. Many of you know her, and we appreciate the Chamber for hosting this and making this available to us. We appreciate that. Basically, what I want to talk about is two things. One, to introduce the candidates very briefly, and then second, to talk about the guidelines of how we want to operate and run this evening's talk. The introduction of the candidates, you probably know them. They're all sitting in the front, and we have the two mayoral candidates, Mr. Heading and Ms. Wixom, to the far left of the audience, to the far right of the dais. And then the other candidates for the City Council, the 5 candidates, are arranged in alphabetical order. Mr. Cortez, Mr. Duringer, Ms. Edwards, Ms. Landrum, and Ms. Robinson. The guidelines that we're using tonight were developed by the League of Women Voters, and all of the candidates have agreed to them and have signed up to honor the rules here. We want to have a civil and productive discussion and information session. What we're going to do is ask for opening statements, which will be 2 minutes each. And then there'll be questions that have come from the audience. We already have a goodly number of questions here that are being arranged, and then we'll have closing statements, 2 minutes. The session is to go from 6 to 8 p.m. So it's only 2 hours, and it's pretty quick. We don't have a lot of time, but we're going to try to get through as many questions as we can. If you don't hear your exact question asked, it may be that 2 or 3 came in on a similar topic and our sorters put them together, and we tried to combine some of the questions. What will happen is we had a little drawing here just before the session began among the candidates as to who goes first. And Ms. Robinson won the prize of going first in the opening statements. What will then happen is that the order of speaking will be clockwise. Now, some of the young people don't even know what clockwise means anymore, but clockwise, which would mean after Ms. Robinson speaks, Mr. Heading is the next speaker, because we're going to go this direction clockwise. And he will then give his opening statement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, down the line. And then when the first question is asked, Mr. Heading will take the first question. It's kind of a descending order, and then it'll go down the line, down to Ms. Robinson. And then Ms. Wixom will have the first shot at the second question. Okay? That's a little complicated, but I think you'll see how it works once we're into it. I'm going to apologize in advance because we may not get to everyone's questions. We have a limited amount of time, but we're going to do our best. And we have in the timing 2 minutes, 1.5 minutes, and 2 minutes, a timer. Cynthia Pretzel, one of the League of Women Voters volunteers and members, is here in the front, and she's going to do the flags. 1 minute warning, you got 1 minute left. 30-second warning, you got 30 seconds left, and then stop. And I may have to, if you have one sentence and you're just about at the end of it, you can finish. Other than that, you pretty much get cut off at the stop sign. And I think we'll try to do this with decorum, and everyone will respect that. In the same approach, please refrain from cheering or clapping or otherwise, interrupting the proceeding while people are talking until the very end, because that way we can get through a lot more information and hear the candidates talk a lot more. And at the end, then hopefully there'll be some applause and that sort of thing. Part of the agreement is that no campaign literature or T-shirts or paraphernalia or hats or things like that are supposed to be brought into the forum room. That can be outside, and I think there are some materials outside for you, but not in here. So if you could honor that. The audience has a very active role in these proceedings by asking questions. And I'm glad we've gotten a lot already. And if you have more, here's how it works. We have runners to hand out little cards and pencils. If you have a question, just raise your hand and one of the runners will come by and give you a card and pencil. And then when you've filled it out, raise your hand again or raise the card up and the runner will come and pick it up and bring it to the front table. And our runners are Ed Cabrera, Joe Gusley, Nita Kenyon, and Vicki Schmidt. And they're here wandering around, walking around the session, ready to pick up your questions. Then the questions will be brought to the front, and we have three sorters, Shelley Higginbotham, Barbara Hawkins, and Sue Bonnets, who are sorting through these. And we have piles of similar questions and similar issues, trying to keep them combined. Each candidate will get an opportunity to answer each question. As I said, we're rotating. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible. As a matter of logistics, Mary Lee Hyman of the League of Women Voters has been key in setting up the logistics for this, and Janice Langley is the technical support person. As a logistical matter, please mute your cell phones or turn them off. This session will be recorded by AGP Video. It's going to be broadcast. It is being broadcast on slow span, and it will also be recorded so you can see it later. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan civic organization. We don't support any candidate or organization, and nor do we oppose them. The goal of the forum is not really a debate. It's more of providing the candidates a fair opportunity to respond to questions and to give voters as much information as possible about their candidacy and their positions. It's not a rally, it's not a debate, and we're hoping for, and I think we will have civil discourse and decorum here. Finally, I just thank again, the Morro Bay Chamber of Commerce, the candidates for putting themselves out there and getting involved, and for the public and the voters and the people who have come here tonight. So with that, we're going to start with opening statements, 2 minutes each, and we'll start with Ms. Robinson. Ms. Robinson?
Good evening. I'm Sarah Robinson, and thank you all for coming tonight. Starting from the beginning, I was born in General Hospital here in SLO. I'm a third-generation Morro Bay resident. I graduated from Coast Union High in Cambria and also from Cuesta College. I have lived here in Morro Bay since 2004. My husband went to El Morro Elementary School and later moved to Cambria, graduating from Coast as well. My husband's parents, Isla and Bill Robinson, bought Harbor Electric in the late 70s. Together, they served Morro Bay and the surrounding areas for roughly 23 years. My grandpa, Jack Smith, was a member of the San Simeon Chamber of Commerce and was president for several years in the 80s. For the last 30 years, I have served food and wine to the tourists in Big Sur, Cambria, and Morro Bay. I can tell you firsthand that tourists come to Morro Bay to get away from big cities, to get fresh air, clean ocean water, quiet nights, and fine dining in small restaurants. I'm a professional server at Bayside Cafe and take pride in serving and receive great joy in making our customers happy and satisfied. This is my home and the reason I am running for office. I am not interested in climbing any political ladder. I only want to serve Morro Bay. I am running because of the huge decisions that have been made and are going to be made. now that will affect our community forever. For example, runaway spending on a sewage treatment plant, the unknowns of what is best for our harbor and the Embarcadero, and the huge dangers posed by possible lithium battery storage. I look forward to sharing my ideas with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading?
Thank you, and I'll add my thanks as well to all of you for coming out this evening. Thanks to the League of Women Voters and also to the Chamber for sponsoring, moderating, and being part of this. My name is Dr. John Heading. I, by trade, graduated from pharmacy school way back. I won't tell you the date, but initially practiced clinical pharmacy for about 10 to 15 years. Moved into administration in hospitals as a department director, and then went back and got a master's degree in business administration with an emphasis in healthcare and finance, and became a hospital COO and then a CEO, and did that for about 20 years in the Central Valley specifically. And so after doing that for a number of years, in 2005, we moved to this beautiful place and found paradise on the Central Coast of California. I didn't quite retire at that time. I still maintained my licensure, and my family and I, my wife's an RN, we opened up 2 pharmacies, one in Cambria, and then a brand new one in Morro Bay in 2010. We operated the one in Morro Bay until we retired in 2019. I got interested in politics my second year here in Morro Bay after talking to a number of people, and after seeing this thing called the Management Partners Report in 2008 that said that the financial status of the city would soon cause it to be a community services district. And so I was elected to the city council initially in 2014, and then became mayor, was elected mayor in 2018, and then again in 2020. And it's just a joy serving this community. I love public comment and public input, and look forward to the questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, thank you. I would like to start also by thanking the League of Women Voters, the Morro Bay Chamber of Commerce, AGP Video, and all of you in attendance here and at home both. As a longtime resident of Morro Bay, I am excited to be running for mayor in the town where I and my husband have raised our children. I've owned a small local business for the past 35 years, and I continue to volunteer in many local and regional organizations that influence our lives. I have experience in local government, so I know how it functions and what needs to be done. I recognize the importance of a strong local economy and how it impacts our town. We are at many crossroads in our community and how the decisions will be made, how we move forward. If I am fortunate enough to be elected as your mayor, I am prepared to make those objective and reasonable decisions for the good of all the residents. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
I also want to start by thanking you all for coming out. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thank you to the Chamber. A little background about myself. I was born in Ventura County. I was raised in a service-based household. My mother was a labor and delivery nurse. My father opened his own small business, and I was in Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout, actually. So service projects were a regular part of my upbringing. Fast forward a few decades, I have my community here. I am close with a number of small business owners in Morro Bay. Some of my best friends work at businesses in Morro Bay. I feel very good about my community. But I do feel like I'm missing that service part of my life. It's something that I connected to and I want back. Now, my career has been in marketing communications, which basically means I'm a professional listener. I take feedback, I use it to change my organization, and then I go back to the people who gave me that feedback and I explain to them the changes that we made. I think that that is a skill that I want to bring to the Morro Bay City Council. You know, we could use a better two-way dialogue better access to the complex information that the council makes their decisions with. And when your elected representative makes a decision that you don't agree with, I think we could use a better shared understanding of the impacts of that. That's why I'm running for council. Like Carla said, there are big decisions in our future. We're going to need to trust each other if we want to make the best decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cordes. Mr. Duringer?
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for attending tonight. I am also an Eagle Scout. I'm a conservative. If elected to City Council, I will reject utopian solutions and only consider constitutional approaches grounded in tradition. For example, Vistra's proposed battery storage is a horrible idea and must be stopped. I am running because last year the council voted unanimously to restrict our Second Amendment rights in Morro Bay, requiring that our guns be locked up and unavailable for self-defense. Ordinance number 644 is unconstitutional and must be immediately repealed. The Second Amendment is our right to say no to constitutional overreach, no to suicidal lockdowns, no to forced indoctrination in government schools, no to forced injection with experimental gene serum. Of course, we never take the law into our own hands, but as we train for lawful defense against violence, we also become useful to our local sheriff as a chorus of no's, defending our families against tyrants. This is not a divisive issue. The vast majority, even a majority of Democrats, support our Second Amendment. Most of the growth in gun culture is with women and minorities. The last several years of COVID fascism have brought us closer than ever to tyranny. Yes, even local tyranny that destroyed local fortunes and even local lives. Many families homeschooled just to keep their kids safe from forced vaccination. Watch how fast they close that loophole next time. We must never let this tyranny happen again. That is the #1 local issue. When everyone around you in power, in and out of government, refuses to say no, you must say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duringer. Ms. Edwards?
I'd like to thank the League of Women's Voters and the Chamber of Commerce for having this event tonight. Thank you to all my fellow candidates and to all of you to coming out tonight. It's really great to see some familiar faces while I'm up here. I'm a California native, born in San Jose. I graduated from Cal Poly in 1995 with a degree in speech communications. My father, a World War II vet, and mother retired here in 2000. And in 2006, I convinced the skincare company that I was working for that I could build their Central Coast territory, and I got to move back to Morro Bay. And it was in 2009 that I realized, well, there wasn't too much I hadn't done in the skincare industry other than own my own business. So I opened the Skin Stop in 2009, and I still own and operate it today. My community involvement includes being the president of the Downtown Merchants Association, as well as serving 6 years on the Chamber of Commerce, 3 of which I served as the chair. I had the pleasure of hiring the strong and dynamic leader we have today, the CEO, Erica Crawford, and I also helped in the establishment of the Government Affairs Committee, which operates to hold the city accountable on issues impacting the businesses. I'm a founding member and former on-air talent with the local radio station, 97.3 The Rock. And I currently serve on the Cuesta College Foundation board, which is the fundraising arm of the college. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum?
Hello, I'm Robin, but most people know me by my nickname, Zara Landrum. I want to thank the League of Women's Voters, the Chamber of Commerce, AGP Video, and all of you for being here, and the people that set this up today and are going to take it down too. I want to thank them. Well, we may differ on various viewpoints. One thing we have in common is that we all love Morro Bay. Having had the privilege of being raised here, I will tell you honestly that when I was younger, I may have taken it for granted. Probably around the time that I realized that all high schools weren't on the beach is when I started to realize that. I traipsed all over town in safety, grew up in a close-knit and supportive community, and I've been able to enjoy open access to the spectacular nature that Morro Bay offers. My own children have been similarly blessed. I admit that, like many, as life gets busy, I stopped paying close attention to the decisions being made in the city. COVID and remote city council meetings left me feeling more and more out of touch and without a voice in Morro Bay's outcome. But then I realized that's not really true, is it? We all have a voice. I'm running for city council hoping to work for, help, and support this community that's given me so much. I've worked in the restaurant business, the wine industry, and in retail, and I've owned and operated my own restaurant. So I have an understanding of what the business community in this town and in this climate are going through. I'm running for City Council in Morro Bay to help Morro Bay find its way at this crossroads while preserving and honoring the essence of what we all love about Morro Bay.
Thank you. And now we're going to go into the questions session. But before we do, I forgot to mention one thing at the intro, and that is a couple of the candidates have said that they might need a break at some point during the meeting, and we want to try to honor that, but by the same token, I think we've only got a short amount of time, and if we break and then come back, it'll be a 15-minute minimum sort of delay. So what I'm suggesting is if any of the candidates feels need to take a break, a bathroom break, or any other kind of reason, what we'll ask them to do is if maybe they can just get up and leave the room and do what needs to be done, maybe pick the moment after they've just done their talk so they will be last up the next time around and get the maximum amount of time. I hope that works okay for everyone. We're going to try it anyway. So the first question will go to Mr. Heading because we're doing this clockwise, and he's going to get the first question, and everyone will get 1.5 minutes to respond to this question, which is as follows. There are many questions on the proposed battery storage project. How do you feel about the battery plant as proposed, and could you briefly discuss any safety protocols you think would be necessary or appropriate? Mr.
Thank you for the question. As a seated council member, the process that the proposed battery storage facility is going through is rather extensive and lengthy. It hasn't reached the city council yet. It is a 22-acre battery storage facility, 600 megawatts suggested by Vistra, and is now in our planning department going through CEQA and an EIR, environmental impact review. That will take literally about 1.5 years. At the end of that time, it will go to the Planning Commission. There'll be a number of public hearings where the public can give input, and then a recommendation will be made to the City Council. At that time, the City Council will have public hearings, and the same process will occur. I can tell you right now, I am concerned about the safety of lithium-ion batteries. I have visited the Moss Landing Vistra site. I am impressed with their fire suppression system, but do remain concerned, but trust the process. Thusly, I think there's been some misinformation about current issues, one being the fact that there's a fire at Moss Landing on the Vistra site. That's not true. That is Tesla. Tesla battery, that's a different type of battery from what I understand, made to burn with no fire suppression system. Why the county ever approved such a facility, I do not understand. And know that from what I've seen, Vistra would not produce that kind of a product.
Thank you. Ms. Wixom?
Thank you very much. I have legitimate concerns about the proposal down there, and those are not fear-driven, but based on information that we're receiving and outreach and community process. We had a workshop here, and there wasn't any discussion about what actually was going to take place there. It was more about what were our desires for public benefits. So there are a lot of hard questions that are unanswered at this point, and the concerns are, one, that there's a proposal to put 3 buildings there, basically the size of Costco. So Is that the highest and best use for the property? Is it the safest use for the property? These are a lot of questions that we have unanswered. I know we all want what's best for our schools, and they're looking at that as a potential property tax revenue, but I'm not willing to risk our public safety. And I think that we need to take a long, hard look at this for the future of our community.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
Yeah, thank you. I don't pretend to be an expert on lithium-ion batteries or this kind of storage facility. So when the opportunity came up for me to do a ride-along with the fire department here in town, I absolutely jumped on that. And I spoke with them, and I asked them, you know, what are their opinions? How do they approach something like this? What I heard back was kind of alarming. You know, the trade industry groups that give best practices to, you know, departments like our fire department, it takes them a really long time to wrap their head around how you would approach, you know, a disaster in new technology. Frankly, the first approaches to tackling those emergencies come from the industries that are producing the technology. So it's not always the best first source. So that gave me a lot of pause. That was the first time that I really looked at the safety of this and took it seriously because I spoke to an expert. If I'm elected, I will trust the experts. I will lean on the people who we as a community trust to keep us safe, and I will make sure that, you know, if we were to, as a community, decide to move forward with something like this, that we would have the experts in our community safety at our back.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer?
Oh, thanks. I'm against the Vistra's battery storage project completely because of many reasons. It's absolutely the wrong location for it. Even if you believe in the technology, it's insane to locate it near homes as proposed. The Space Shuttle Challenger was also put through many safety evaluations, and it blew up. I don't trust the process. I don't trust the experts. I think they have an agenda. They all believe that we can affect global warming by modifying our carbon dioxide output. A lot of people disagree with that. Eventually, a lot of people will come around, especially given geopolitics now, to realize that this unreliable technology is putting us at risk with China. And we should be calling this not BEST, but Nord Stream 3. It makes sense. It makes no sense at all to make us vulnerable to China's monopoly on rare earths for that technology. When the shift is back to fossil fuels, we'll be left holding the bag of batteries. There's the biggest reason against it is it's a huge opportunity cost in terms of not going ahead with the best use now, deciding on a course, what is the theme for Morro Bay, and going ahead with development on that through community input.
Thank you, Mr. Duringer. Ms. Edwards?
I think it's important to recognize that California as a state is moving forward toward renewable energy, and it's a fact. I think that when we're looking at that property, we're looking at something to me that could have a traffic flow issue. At the workshop that happened on the 14th, it was the one thing that kept coming back to my mind is how are we going to move traffic around? We already have traffic going out to the Rock that's an issue, gets backed up. And the routes that were being looked at this workshop to flow the traffic around whether it's the plant or the development next to it, kept coming back out to the 41, and that is of grave concern to me. I do believe that when the EIR report comes back, we'll know whether or not this is a project that makes sense for us, but I do think that we need to consider projects like this. Because when we lost our old power plant, quite frankly, we did have a gap in our general fund that was never filled. And it is a concern moving forward. But I do feel that looking at the safety, the needs and concerns of our citizens are by far more important than filling that gap.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum?
When I initially heard about the idea to have the biggest battery storage in the world in Morro Bay. I thought, that's cool. That would be awesome to have that. Well, the driving momentum to have the largest battery facility in the world may look good to others outside the city on a larger campaign platform. Those of us here in Morro Bay are concerned. I've been talking to residents, I've been going door to door and talking to people. I've had people email me, and they're really concerned about it. The safety of the battery technology. I mean, it's just kind of an unknown new technology. And why do we really need to be the guinea pigs for that? I'm not sure. There's a lot we still need to learn about it, and I'm willing to wait and hear what they come up with, but I do have a lot of questions. Also, the fact that it would require our fire department to have to hire more employees. The fire chief has explained to me they would have to remodel some of their facility. So there would be costs for Morro Bay involved, and I think we need to weigh that all out and really stop and think about it.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
I'll start off by saying that I am 100% against the lithium battery storage in this location. I am 100% against the lithium battery storage at the current location they are suggesting. There's no question that we need new technology, but the question is location. The number one thing for me is safety, and I think that is what the majority of our community is concerned about. It's located very close to our high school. We have the hub of our tourist industry. Our estuary is steps away. It's something that we should all be very concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the second question will start with Ms. Wixom. This question is, what is your position on B-22 and why?
Can I pass the question out?
Well, you can not say anything if you don't want.
Just kidding. I have not been supportive of the proposed tax measure at this juncture. I feel that there are many partnerships that are not contributing to the maintenance of the waterfront. I recognize that we have had a loss in revenue due to COVID. We've had a loss in revenue due to other maritime changes down there. But there are opportunities to find funding with those partnerships that we could form. There are opportunities to look at revenues that are earned on the west side of the Embarcadero that may not be fully recognized back into the harbor fund at this point. So I want to support anything we can for the efforts to maintain and repair our harbor, but 100%, but not through a tax measure.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
Thank you. Yeah, look, there was no Morro Bay in the first place without the harbor. There wouldn't be a Morro Bay today without the Embarcadero and the waterfront. And frankly, as someone who's looking, 10, 20, 30 years down the road for my own future here, there wouldn't be a Morro Bay in the future if we don't invest in capital projects for our waterfront. This is something that is critical to life here. Look, B-22 is imperfect. That's my opinion, but I support it. I think that this is a critical way for us to maintain our community. It's the one that's in front of us here. We have to take it. Now, it's up to all of us, right? Everyone in this room gets to vote on this. And if I'm elected, I will have to deal with the ramifications of that vote one way or another. I will either have to be here looking for ways to reduce costs for you around us voting for it, or if it is struck down, I will have to find other ways to support this capital improvement to our harbor. This is not money that we are going to avoid. These are costs that we are going to have to incur as people who want to have a Morro Bay in the future. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer?
Thank you. I'm against B22 because I want to see more, better audits of existing leases to make sure that lease covenants are enforced, requiring tenants to pay up for any needed maintenance under the leases. I want to make sure that the leases are audited to make sure that the leases are reappraised, lease subjects premises are reappraised and they're paying the rent that they should be paying. Before we rush to a parcel tax that applies to every parcel in Morro Bay, I'd like them to look at a special assessment district. Also, why is this parcel tax with no end date? Temporary would make more sense. Looks to me like they're just looking for another general revenue source. There's some hypocrisy there. I mean, if they really believe in global warming, we're all going to die, or the harbor is going to be a lot larger in 10 years. I do think it's a good idea to invest, but we need to look at focusing the tax incidence on those parcels closest, and preferably the leaseholders, or the lessees.
Ms. Edwards?
So the current state of our harbor is simply not good. And we don't really have time to correct the management of the budget in this situation. So I'm not a fan of short-term fixes, but we need to find long-term solutions. And in this case, I feel that a $120 partial tax is one way of getting us there right now in terms of maintenance of the necessary things that need to happen. But I would like to make a suggestion that we had a parking study done, and I think that taking a look at paid parking program along the waterfront could be a great step in the right direction to correcting this.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum?
I think that the harbor is critical to Morro Bay as well. I agree with that. But I don't think that this measure is the right one. I don't like that it doesn't have an end date. And also, I don't like that it's not just $120 a year. It increases with inflation yearly. And from the city's own website, inflation currently is at 40%. Sorry, 40, it's the highest in 40 years. And it appears to be worsening monthly, if not weekly. That's a quote, a badly quoted quote, but it is a quote. I'm more interested in pursuing grants or exploring loans to address this very necessary infrastructure. And one other thing that I find it interesting that one of the wind farm bidders or potential bidders has donated money in favor of Measure B22. I find that strange.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
There's no question that the harbor needs help in a lot of different areas in our harbor. I can't support Measure B22 for the property tax to tax the whole town. Not everyone uses the Embarcadero. There's people that have second homes here that can't even vote on this. There's people who are older and are on a fixed income. And as Zara was saying, it doesn't cap at $120. It will raise depending on the economy. There are ways the harbor can receive more funding as federal and state grants and loans. And from my understanding, they just received 2 for the waterfront in the last few months. So there are other ways to help our harbor, but I don't believe B22 is the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the third question, and we'll start with Mr. I'm sorry.
Would you like
I'm
me to
sorry,
answer
Mr.
this one,
Henning.
or-
You don't get one. No.
There you go. Yeah.
No, sorry.
No worries.
My
Thank you.
mistake. Sorry.
All right, thank you. I do support B22. I can tell you that having been on the council for 8 years, the needs from at least our initial study done are about $600,000 to $800,000 per year. to just maintain the harbor. We have a number of revetments that are close to failing. We had a failure, in fact, about 2.5 years ago. That resulted in a cost to the city of $1.5 million, which the city didn't have at that time, and had to renegotiate the lease downward in order to be able to accommodate that. It is a serious, significant issue that's been going on for more than 20 years. There's been no capital budget for the harbor. In addition to that, our general plan, local coastal plan, fortunately through the Coastal Commission, we didn't have to do a managed retreat from the Embarcadero, which was a heroic event on the part of our staff. But what we do have to do is every 5 years assess it and fix any failing infrastructure. I believe that this is a fair tax. I do believe that putting it into the hands of the voters is the right thing to do to allow our community to make the decision. But you cannot put it on the back of the lessees in terms of increasing rates such that our small businesses fail on the Embarcadero. So again, I do support it, and thanks for the question.
Thank you. Okay, now the next question. We'll start with Mr. Cordes on this one. And the question that deals with downtown. What is your vision for downtown Morro Bay, Main Street in particular, and what do you see as the major challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's where my heart really lies. I lived just above the David J. Robinson Gallery in the middle of downtown for about 4 years. I loved it. It felt like I was in the middle of some metropolitan city, walking downstairs to Shine to get my groceries and across the street to Buttercup Cafe to get my coffee. And I think that that is a vision of the future of downtown Morro Bay that a lot of us could get behind. I think if we were to increase the height restrictions on some of those buildings, we could see mixed use coming in. We could see revamped shops. We could see a little more vibrant life on the weekends there. I think most of us in this room probably appreciated when Buttercup showed up, and I think a lot more of us appreciated when the Morro Bay Butcher Shop showed up. These are new businesses that are raising the quality bar in town. They're not challenging other businesses. They're bringing all the ships in the bay up with them. So I think that by changing some of our policies, maybe improving some of the infrastructure, improving the sidewalks, adding a bathroom to to this downtown area, by doing those things, we can sort of bring forward these new business owners and maybe bring forward some new life into the city that that might make it feel a little more vibrant. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer?
Morro Bay is beautiful, but it reeks of socialism. If we want growth here, we need to make people feel safe. We need to make families feel safe, and also businesses feel safe. And downtown specifically, it's dark at nighttime. You don't feel safe even walking around at night. I think we just need to emphasize growth. Do the things that all those red states are doing to attract business. Maybe copy them. And we'll see more growth here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards?
My work with the Chamber of Commerce really speaks to this in terms of the vibrancy of having a central downtown area and the flourishing of a local economy. Some of the things that I look at the things that I am concerned about, and that is definitely having, restrooms for our community and tourists to use. I'm also concerned about the fact that we've been back and forth on amending codes with regard to signage. We do have Wayfair signage coming, and that is good. I'm very excited about that, as I've been kind of looking forward to that for over a decade. I do feel that height restrictions are something that we should take a look at, especially because we do need housing, and mixed housing and restaurant retail area could be something for us to consider. I think that this is an opportunity to not bring big business in. I don't think that's what we see in our downtown. I think it's about hoping that we can strengthen the businesses we currently have and help grow them.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum?
I've, again, talked to a lot of businesses, a lot of people, and what I've heard from business owners is some of the things that they've complained about in that area on Main Street is the fact that there's no public restrooms, so I think that would be helpful to try to address that. The wayfinder signs, directing where the Embarcadero is, the rock, that kind of thing. And also the cleanliness that has been brought up to me, is the cleanliness as far as, just that downtown area. And also another thing that people have come to me complaining about is the problems getting a business license. I understand it's been kind of tricky to get a business license, and so a lot of the new businesses are struggling. They're not able to open. I mean, it's taking them months instead of weeks to get a business license. But I think if we looked for ways to address some of those issues, that it would really help support them and make them feel more included in the business in Morro Bay.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
I agree with Zara on a lot of her points. The restroom, we definitely need a restroom downtown for our visitors. The business licenses, I have friends that are opening new businesses right downtown on Main Street, and they are having a very hard time getting all of that going. There's a lot of roadblocks that they are encountering. There are a lot of empty storefronts downtown, and I'm hoping that since we're coming out of the pandemic, that things will start to open up again and some new businesses come in, but we also just revamp what we have. We have a sweet town. We have some really great locals here that have wonderful businesses. So I say just keep giving them support and keep shopping. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading?
Yes, thank you. Great points. I'll agree with a number of them. I do agree that I do agree with height changes and zoning changes that allow for, in certain overlay zones, there to be increase in heights for mixed use potential on the downtown area. I think one of the biggest issues is mainly folks come to Morro Bay for the Embarcadero, and there needs to be a connector between the Embarcadero and the downtown area. And for those of you that have been around for a while, you may recall the Centennial Plaza / Marketplace Plaza plan, which is currently moving forward. It's in closed session at the City Council, so I can't talk about it with regard to those negotiations. But one of the key features of that is to have a connector between the downtown and the Embarcadero to allow them to be drawn from the Embarcadero to downtown. I think it's the permit process, not necessarily the business license, that needs to be improved. Permits take too long. The planning process absolutely needs to be improved. And I think we need to look at incentives for new businesses in terms of assistance. I agree with the bathroom. I think we all do. There's a need for a bathroom downtown. And the last thing that I'll mention is that a clean community is one that is visited and returned to. And we've got to do a good job of making this place downtown, the place clean and welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wixom?
Thank you. I think we probably covered most everything, but I definitely agree with most of the comments here. I think that the permitting process has been restrictive and time-consuming, and that's cost us business opportunities. I think the Chamber's doing a good job in outreach right now. Nobody talked about that they've just hosted and put together a meeting to talk about a bid, business improvement district for that area, which could help facilitate a lot of these things from happening, or for happening, sorry, not from happening. I think the community itself, the business community there has to decide if that's what they want, if they're willing to invest their money to invest back into the community. We talked about some heights changing, and the Planning Commission, I'm thankful for, has pulled that aside to look at that. There may be some outer lying areas, but you'll change the charm of the downtown if you're not careful about what you do. People call it funky, and that's what it is. One thing we didn't talk about, because we all know we need restrooms, we need lighting, we need sidewalk repairs, we need connectability, we need parking. We need parking. It's very challenging whether you're on the downtown area or the Embarcadero. Parking is an issue, and it's something we have to address if we're going to try and rehabilitate that area.
Thank you. This will be question number 4, and I'll address this starting with Mr. Duringer. The question is as follows. Morro Bay has 14 mobile home parks with approximately 750 residents. There is a rent stabilization ordinance, number 499, that protects these residents from out-of-control rent raises. How will you help to keep this ordinance intact? Please.
Thank you.
No, you didn't. I don't think they heard you.
Yeah,
The answer is?
my answer is I would not. I'm totally against rent control. I used to be an eviction attorney. In the early 90s, did about 4,000 appearances. I probably made more homeless people than anybody else here. But rent control is extremely bad for everyone, for landlords and also tenants. If you ask yourself, why do we have a housing problem? That's it, probably the number one reason. Rent control doesn't help anybody.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Duringer. Ms. Edwards?
Can I ask to repeat the question, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
Morro Bay has 14 mobile home parks with approximately 750 residents. There is a rent stabilization ordinance, number 499, that protects these residents from out-of-control rent raises. How will you help keep this ordinance intact?
As far as I know, there is regulations in place not only by the city but by the state. And I believe that in this case, if, for example, the mobile park were to be turned over to a new owner, those rents would be honored, if you will. And so I would be in favor of respecting that. I don't think that that it would be fair, for example, to raise over fair market value in that case, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Landrum?
The mobile home parks are one of the last bastions of affordable housing. And I think it's really important to protect their rent control. I think that's been honored by Morro Bay, and I think we should continue doing that.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
I am for the rent control. The majority of people living in these mobile home parks are living on fixed incomes, so to keep raising these rents, they would have no housing. I'm 100% for protecting our seniors and our people that need that affordable housing, like myself, maybe when I'm a senior too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading?
Yes, thank you. I absolutely support Ordinance 499. I've affirmed that a number of times at the City Council meeting. About 10% of our population lives in mobile homes. And it's been said, and I'll repeat it, that this is the most affordable, low-cost housing that we have in the city. And if we lost that, it would be tragic to lose a large number of our population that have lived here for many, many years, and that would be displaced into an area outside of Morro Bay that would cost more, and it would just be tragic, in my opinion. So absolutely support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wixom?
Yes, I would agree with most all the other speakers up here. I do support it. I'm thankful that we have 14 parks that we can have housing available for those on limited income, whether young or old. Having a senior mother in this community who could no longer afford to live independently, I can totally relate to what that value is to these people. They participate in our community, they recreate here, they shop here, and to be able to have a safe and affordable place to live is so important, and I will continue to support that.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes.
Yeah, absolutely. Rent stabilization is something that's a little tricky because obviously it can mess with the market, but we can't control market forces here in Morro Bay. All we can control is, do we kick people out of their homes? Do we keep people who are working in our businesses, who are contributing in our community, do we make it possible for them to stay in Morro Bay? And I think as a community, we should all band together and say absolutely yes. We should say Ordinance 499 doesn't go far enough, because we all know friends and neighbors who have been evicted on short notice for any number of reasons. Maybe the property value of where they're living just went a little too high. I mean, those are catastrophes for us to lose working, contributing neighbors. This is something that we should all be able to get behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question will go, I believe, to Ms. Edwards. But before we do, I just want to thank the audience for all their questions. We've got a lot of good questions here, but we may need some more. So if you've got any more questions, write them down, get a card, that sort of thing. And I appreciate the panelists for giving crisp answers and allowing us to go through a number of questions. So that's I think I appreciate it. It's a very civil and decorous meeting. So this is question number 5 for Ms. Edwards to start with. Would you support a full-time code enforcement officer as well as the present part-time officer?
So, yes, my understanding is that we do have a full-time code enforcement officer as well as one part-time coming on. And one of my main concerns visiting the neighborhoods in particular was with short-term rentals. And my understanding is that the code officer is going to be used in terms of monitoring those rentals. And I do think that that's a good thing, especially when we're talking about the housing shortage that we have that's affordable. You know, there are businesses out there operating without a license. And I think the city is, believe it or not, done a good job auditing that and catching them. So yes, I'm for that.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum?
I agree. I think that the code enforcement is really important to address the short-term vacation rental issue that we have in Morro Bay, because that clearly is taking away from the affordable housing rental stock that's in Morro Bay. So I think the more that we could have enforced that and make sure that everyone's complying, I think the better.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
I also support the enforcement and enforcer. And I would hope that it would be a local person, and I hope that it would not be outsourced to another area coming in. I feel like our short-term rentals have gotten a bit out of control, which takes away housing for us locals looking for rentals. A lot of these people coming in vacationing here aren't abiding by our rules and regulations, and I feel that having an enforcer would keep things more in line and make the rest of the neighborhoods feel more comfortable. So I am in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading?
Yes.
Yes.
I absolutely do support full-time code enforcement. We do have a part-time individual that is, I can tell you, overloaded. I see the complaints. I look at the responses, and when we wrote and passed the STR ordinance, it contemplated a position that would be dedicated to enforcement. The payment for that or the cost for hiring that individual would be borne by fines from code violations. We need to not only enforce the STR issues, but other issues that are not being able to be enforced at this time because of the individual right now is just overwhelmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wixom.
Thank you for the question. I support a full-time officer. I'm not sure to what level it rises to need 1.5 positions for a town of 10,000. I'm certainly willing to take a look at that, but want to be cognitive of the cost of hiring more employees. The idea of it paying for itself with the penalties and fines that would be levied is great, as long as the enforcement is done consistently throughout and not, most of it's complaint driven. And so I hear a lot of people saying that they're fined for something that a neighbor is not. So one full-time sounds good, and if they're going to work towards the short-term rentals, then I would be in support of it.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes.
Thanks. I think one misconception that I hear a little bit is that, code enforcement is about fining people, or it's about, punishing our neighbors. And that's not the goal of our code enforcement policies. They are to make our community live up to the standards that we've all set through, zoning, through, our different, the codes that we have. So that's why if you do receive a report from a neighbor, or if you do report a neighbor, they're going to get many opportunities to correct that before there's any kind of negative action taken for them. That's because we're neighbors, right? Like, sometimes you do need an intermediary to step in and say, oh, that has been parked there for too long, or that lien is across the boundaries, or this business is operating illegally. But we don't necessarily want to drive neighbors away. We want to remediate the things that are wrong. So I think a second code officer gives us a little more leeway to be able to do that with grace and to give each other a little bit of patience.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer.
Yes, I'm in favor of hiring a full-time code enforcement officer if that's justified, and I believe it is. I'm a very strong supporter of short-term rentals. We have one down in Grover Beach. But it has to be done properly and enforced. All the negative externalities have to be controlled, because that impinges on rights of neighbors. My mission as an estate planning attorney is to help families transmit life, fortune, and honor to succeeding generations, and I believe that cities should do the same thing and increase family power. And one of the biggest ways of doing that is to increase the market value of their homes. Short-term rentals is one way to do that. It increases the revenue available to families, and I don't believe that it's a drag on affordable housing. I believe that much bigger drags than that are things like the rent control ordinance, rent stabilization ordinance 499, state subsidies to big developers to build below market rent housing. All those things kill the market that's potentially available to private families to come up to meet that shortfall in housing demand and serve that demand. And more enforcement would allow more STR units to be built closer to each other. We have a neighbor that, sometimes there's marijuana smoke smells a lot, and my daughter complains that it makes her feel sick. Well, we need to control that kind of thing, but the industry is good, and it helps us grow, helps everyone grow in Morro Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duringer. The next question will start with Ms. Landrum, and here's the question. What are your plans for maintaining the city's infrastructure, such as roads and sewer pipes?
That's a tricky question, because so much of that has been not maintained. To catch back up to with where we should be, I guess. I think we should invest in our roads. I think that there's a lot of need for that. There recently was a council meeting where the city paid a consultant to recommend what should be done, and he recommended that just to keep up with where we should be to maintain the roads, we should spend, I can't remember the exact amount, but council decided to spend less than that. So we're not going to be keeping up, are we? I think that there's sources of money for these kinds of things, but they're not being used. I think that our infrastructure is definitely neglected and it needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson.
First, I think we should direct the city manager to direct the public works director to an assessment of all city streets and produce a listing based on priorities with costs. People who live here, like yourselves, know that our streets are pretty awful, especially North Morro Bay. Providing safe streets is a basic responsibility of a full-service city, which we are. The consultant the city hired and then ignored presented convincing data that the city cannot continue on that path of neglect any longer. It is important that we do maintain our streets, not only for us, but for our visitors coming. It doesn't make for a good look for when people come or they stay at a STR, a short-term rental, or are headed to dinner and they're going bumpity bump bump down the road. So as a council member, I would make streets a priority and support the funding, which I believe is $2.8 million a year, and I believe only $1.4 million was spent. So it is our fiduciary responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading.
Thank you for the question. Regarding roads, the council did receive about a month ago a comprehensive review by an external consultant, internal engineer, regarding our roads. All roads in the city were mapped out, and a PCI index was assigned to them, and a plan for actually fixing them was put into place. We are allocating $2.8 million this year in the budget, but the issue is the future. And I think one of the things to look at is if you continue to do that, you're going to maintain the same PCI. You will not improve the quality over time. 2.8 barely gets you there. I think when interest rates are more favorable, the city needs to look at potentially a bond measure where it can obtain a significant amount of dollars to do a large number of streets at once, and hopefully at a time when debt service costs and the monthly payment regarding that are lower than the actual annual expenditure for capital expenses for the city. We allocated $3 million for sewers. You asked about that. For this year, sewer pipes and the sewer system, not the plant, wastewater treatment facility, but our capital budget does include $3 million for that, and we need to continue to implement our One Water plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wixom.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what John has said. It's not enough, and maybe we do need to look at a bond measure. We're just going to keep chasing the street repairs. If you live out at the north end of Morro Bay, you feel like your streets never get paved. Well, that's pretty much because they don't. They fill the potholes. And the money to going to streets is coming uptown here in the areas that are traveled and maintained because they don't want them to fall in disrepair. In the meantime, you just never get anything done besides your potholes being filled. But it's not just the leaky pipes we have, it's the water and the sewer pipes, it's the lack of safe roads, safe access biking. Our bike paths around here, there are some that are great and new, and other areas that it's so unsafe. They just received grant money for crossing up here by Quintana, and that's good. I have a staff member who walks it and is fearful after a certain time of day to cross there. We need to do better, and we need to collaborate with the community and with staff and come up with a improvement plan that we can move forward with and take care of addressing some of these needs, solve the problem.
Mr. Cordes?
Yeah, well said. I think I agree strongly with both Ms. Wixom and Mr. Heading. What I would say about this is that it's a great example of the kind of communication gaps that we currently have. The report that was given at the City Council meeting 3 weeks ago was amazing. It had so much great information. It had a street-by-street breakdown of all of Morro Bay, color-coded, so you could see exactly exactly what we already know, which is that the streets in North Morro Bay are in bad shape. But street by street, you could look at this and see exactly what the problem looks like. They also went over the remediation tactics. If you start by just repairing the cheapest to repair streets, then the worst streets never get repaired. If you start at the worst streets, then the best streets fall into disrepair while you're spending time repairing the worst streets. There are not good answers. This is going to be something that we're all going to need to educate ourselves on because, like Ms. Wixom said, we're probably going to need a bond measure. We're going to need to go to you for dozens of millions of dollars because this is, to fix next year, a $22 million task, according to that report. So my point being, there was great information in that report, and it took me 45 minutes to digest it all. How many of us have that much time on a Tuesday night? That's a lot to ask. We need better communication of these critical pieces to share with everyone. Because if you get home from work and you have these kinds of big questions in front of you, you need to be able to trust your government to make the decision that you agree with. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer.
I live in North Morro Bay. I have a Jeep. Roads don't bother me. But I think they do bother a lot of tourists that we'd like to attract. So sewers, roads are basic services that need to be maintained. Rather than the knee-jerk response of always enacting another tax increase or bond measure, people are really pressed right now. They can't afford these things. So we need to have more intelligent approaches, like maybe a special tax on electric cars, because electric cars are very heavy, and the batteries are extremely heavy, and they're damaging our roads. So that's one thing to look at, a tax for having an electric car in Morro Bay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
I think we can all agree that our streets need work. I think it's good to hear from the mayor that we have the monies allotted to do so, and that a bond measure is probably something to take a look at. However, when I think about the streets, I think about the projects, big or small, that we're contemplating, that are on the table in terms of development. And I get concerned on the overall circulation of traffic. This is very common in towns like ours where projects get going, big or small, and before they know it, they have traffic flow issues. So while we're looking at the streets and repairs, I'd love to see us also take a look at that. In addition, there's a project, the Highway 41 interchange, that if we have the money, I'd really like to see that project done.
Okay, thank you. Now we're at the next question, and Ms. Robinson, you get to start this one again. We've gone through full cycle here. And this one is, do you think the water reclamation facility will adequately address Morro Bay's water needs for years to come? How will you make sure it is run efficiently?
That is a loaded question.
I just read them, that's all I
Do you mind repeating it one more time?
Buying time is not. Do you think the water reclamation facility will adequately address Morro Bay's water needs for years to come? How will you make sure it is run efficiently?
Well, with the amount of money we have spent so far, I sure hope it does, because it is out of control, in my opinion, and they're asking for more money. So with the amount of money that we citizens are giving and the city is paying, I would hope so. I would hope that it would supply enough water for the residents. It was my understanding that our wharf that we had down by the ocean, it was old. We were supposed to upgrade that, but that didn't happen. So I really hope that we can finalize this project sooner than later, because it has been a strain on the businesses, on the residents, on our pocketbooks, and on the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading.
Great, thank you for the question. There are multiple sources of water for Morro Bay, not just the water reclamation facility that is being built. The first stage of the project actually will be completed this month, and that will allow us to treat and produce legal secondary discharge water that will go into the ocean. Right now, the initial modeling shows that our indirect potable reuse project will produce approximately 60 to 80% of the water needs of Morro Bay in the future. The testing that's going on now is the siting for the location of the wells, and then further refining and determination of exactly quantitatively what we can attain through indirect potable reuse. So that will be a source. I think there's a misconception that will not run 24/7 in the city. That is something that will be utilized at times when maybe state water is not available. There's significant drought and other sources of water again become unavailable to the city because it's expensive to run an IPR unit such that we've built. But it does guarantee us in the future water resiliency, and it guarantees my grandchildren who are going to high school here in the future a source of water that will allow them to continue to sustainably live in the city of Morro Bay. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wixom.
Thank you. I started on this issue, and it was basically from the time you turn your faucet on to the time you flush your toilet and beyond. This is a primary component of a healthy community, and it has to be affordable. We have a little over 10,000 residents, and we're already so far over budget. So how will we manage the long-term maintenance of this facility? It is state-of-the-art. It's beautiful. I just toured it the other day, and it took 10, 12 years to put this project in place. And that's not even the water component coming yet. This is just our sewer. So we need to work with the staff and the community, and we need a plan in place to ensure that we will maintain this for generations to come, that we will have clean drinking water available to our families in the future, and that this will be maintained. One of the things that concerns me is that several of the grants that were taken out for this facility were conditioned on the water recycling component meeting a timeline. And if we don't meet that timeline, we stand the chance of losing those grants. So a lot on the plate to think about there.
Mr. Cordes.
Thank you. Yeah, so I actually wanted to talk about those grants exactly. That timeline that we have is still several years out. So we have plenty of time to get that secondary function, which is essentially we have a wastewater treatment plant and then we have a water conditioning plant, right? They're two in one. That is how we were able to get those low-interest grants. Part of the reason why we combine these projects is because it saved us money. It's because we now have water resiliency in the future, but we also have, a brand-new water treatment plant. We're not going to be in the situation that some of our neighbor communities are in, where they are consistently under watch by the federal government for their inadequate wastewater treatment. So we have that secured. The bonus is up to 80% of our future water available to us. Now that we still have to see, and that's something that whoever wins this election, that's going to be a big part of our future. The way I would ensure that, I mean, I can't ensure that. I can't sit here and promise you that we're going to get 80% of our water from this. What I can promise you is that I'm going to be living in Morro Bay for decades. I'm going to be invested in our future water sources. This is going to be something that's critical to me and my family. So I hope I can get your vote based on that alone.
Good. Mr. Duringer.
I'm not sure I want WRF to be adequate if it means toilet to tap. I don't think that's a good image for our tourist industry, and I'm going to be drinking a lot more bottled water if that happens. Passing water through a brown zone lot and then making it more polluted and then filtering it again doesn't make a lot of sense. On the other hand, I've got no problem with it being used for non-potable uses if that can be done economically. It's fortunate, at least we have multiple sources of water, and from what I'm hearing, we've got adequate other sources.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
So I think a lot of this has been covered as far as the low-interest loans and the reclamation portion of the project. It's the reason that we got it. I think what's more important is knowing this is our insurance policy, that we can be autonomous when it comes to having water for our city. And I think that if the state was to run out of water, district run out of water, I mean, we have water. So I think that this is good. I am looking forward to seeing if that reclamation aspect works for us. And I think that, I think that's probably where I stand with it as far as that goes, so.
Okay, fine. Ms. Landrum?
It's a wastewater reclamation facility. It seems like all of those words should work. I expect that it will. It's why it cost so much for the residents, right? It wasn't just a sewer treatment plant, it was the whole wastewater reclamation part. So I expect that it should, or else something's wrong. And I as well am concerned about the grant money and the deadline. That's a big concern for me too. It was just a lot of money to spend, and I certainly hope it works.
Okay, great. Next question, this will go to Mr. Heading first. Do you support the city securing the proposed wind farm leases?
The city won't secure the leases. The leases will be secured through the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management by 3 bidding companies that will bid on a site that's about 399 square miles, 21 miles offshore of Morro Bay. That will be the leasing process that's controlled by the federal government. I do support that those projects will provide enough energy to actually greater than will Diablo nuclear plant, about 3 gigawatts of energy versus 2.4, which is currently produced by that nuclear plant. It's been a long time coming. The lease is supposed to happen in December. However, it will take 6 to 8 years to actually see that come to fruition because of the long permitting process and review process by the federal government. But I absolutely do support it. I think for Morro Bay, it offers a potential for connectivity to our existing grid and also potential for lease revenue through the outfall that currently exists in our infrastructure right off the site in the ocean. Thank you.
Ms. Wixom?
Thank you. I attended the Senate hearing that was held here talking about offshore wind energy, and it felt like David and Goliath in the room, that the decisions had already been made, and I'm sure they had by the federal government, and we're just a landing strip for them, so to speak, and it was very disheartening. We all recognize the need for renewable energy, especially here in California, but there's so much unknown about this technology and about this type of wind energy. This isn't going to be the same as over in some of the European countries where it's anchored to the bottom. This is going to be floating, moving, and so we don't know what is going to happen, who's going to buy up those areas, not to mention the cost of our fishing industry. They talked about the 300 plus jobs that it's going to bring, but they didn't talk much about the 300 jobs that'll be lost when there's 90 members of the Morro Bay commercial fishing industry, and they all employ people on their boats and the upland trade, the fish markets, the fuel docks, all those things. So this is a huge trade out, and it changes who we are. If our fishing community can't use those waters, then how do they survive? And not just Morro Bay fishing, but the West Coast fisheries also. It will be hard hit, and I don't know if they can survive it.
Okay. Mr. Cordes?
Thank you. Yeah, I was also at the hearing, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in offshore wind to look up the video. It was the House Subcommittee on Oceans and Minerals, and so if you just Google that plus Morro Bay, you'll see the recording. It's about 4 hours, so you might need to do some cleaning or something while you're watching. But I thought it was fascinating. It was not a joking matter. It was very serious. Everyone who got up there had great things to say. I thought that they were heard. The truth is, the decision had already been made. You know, they had already made the decision to put this lease in place, but they are hearing these concerns because we as a community, we as, you know, as people represented by that subcommittee need to be the ones to kind of shepherd ourselves through this process, right? We do have a responsibility to the fishing community as one of the most, you know, quintessential industries in our town. We need to help them get through this. We need to look at ways to expand other opportunities for them, other ways that they can make money while this is getting worked out. But there are signs that down the road there could be opportunity for this to produce better fishery habitats that could help the fishing industry in the long term. So I would encourage you all to watch the recording of that if you're interested. Everyone, absolutely everyone who could be concerned about this had a voice there, and I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer.
The Morro Bay may have a limited role with the windmill, with the wind farms, but whatever role we have, or whatever role we can have, should be against this technology. And number one, it's bad for commercial fishing, the trawlers in particular. But more than anything, it's just, this is obsolete technology. These unreliables, solar and wind, have been obsolete since February 24th. When Ukraine was invaded, Taiwan is under threat of invasion. We cannot be dependent on China. And it's foolish to tether our economy in any way to this technology. That whole technology is dependent on Chinese rare earths, and it's bad for our roads, all the electric cars. It just doesn't make sense. Carbon dioxide, regardless of what you feel about that as a pollutant or whether it causes global warming, nothing we do is going to keep China and India from producing carbon dioxide. They're going to be laughing all the way to the bank, whatever we try to do. So we need to do what's important for our own national security, and nothing we do on carbon dioxide is going to affect global warming at all.
Ms. Edwards.
I think the one thing that I'm getting here is that we have time, and time is really important when it comes to these projects, and the technology develops over time, and we can assess that as we go along. I do think, having spoken to multiple fishing families that have been here for years, it is concerning to hear about how they may be affected by this. It is something that I want to be mindful of when it comes to decisions like this in the future. But again, I go to the facts, and I'm reminded that California is moving towards renewable, green, clean energy. And this is one project that's definitely farther along than just on the table. And I hope to be in some of that dialogue.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum.
I too am concerned about the fishing industry. I'm worried that we're trading a food source for electricity, and I'm not sure that even what is the cost of that electricity? Do we know? Do we know it's such a new technology? Will it be even affordable? I think there needs to be an in-depth environmental and also economic report to figure that all out. But again, it will be, this isn't anything that's going to happen soon, but I think that all needs to be looked at. I don't know how much control Morro Bay has over it because it's a federally mandated kind of thing, but I would really think we should look at it closer.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson.
I do not support the wind farm. I do not support the wind farm. It's a federal decision in federal waters. DC they are making these decisions. It is years away from happening, possibly 6 to 7 years. Who's to say technology will not change from here to then? I did speak to Jeremiah O'Brien, the president of the Fishing Association here in Morro Bay, and he has grave concerns. We are a fishing community. We need to support our fishermen and fisherwomen. Wind is a natural resource that we should harness. I believe it does. It's way better in Mojave, the Mojave Desert. It works great. Keep it there. It works great in Palm Springs. Keep it there. To use us as a guinea pig in our precious, it's a 400 square miles right next to our sanctuary. That does not make sense to me, and it sounds very dangerous. So I am very against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. This will go to Ms. Wixom first. How will you address the city's homeless population?
Well, I don't think it's a city problem. I think it's a national problem throughout the United States and extremely severe problem in the state of California. We have great weather here, and so it seems to attract that situation even more so. There's just been a coalition that's forming now countywide that is addressing that very issue and trying to take a more regional approach at housing opportunities, safe parking areas for them, and other facilities where they can stay. I feel everybody should have an opportunity to have a roof over their head, and that includes our unhoused population. So I would be 100% on board to work collaboratively with all of those entities to find resolve. I don't know that you can resolve the problem, but to certainly try and find ways to better the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes.
Yeah, hi. I would address our unhoused population by saying hello, hi, good morning. I mean, these are people, these are our neighbors. They may not feel like it to some people, but these are people who live in our community. And I think that while obviously the larger issues that are causing such high rates of homelessness are not necessarily in our control, I think Ms. Wixom is right that there are county motions to basically tackle these problems in a cooperative sense with our community neighbors. But that does not alleviate us of the responsibility to do more. And I think we already have some organizations in our community who are reaching out. We have a great police force who are compassionate and working closely with the community. But there is an opportunity to do more, and I look forward to being a part of that on the council.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm a former eviction attorney, so I have probably created more homeless people here than anybody else. Know a little bit about it. There are many reasons people are homeless. Some of them are frankly bums. Some of them are just there through no fault of their own. They're maybe crazy, have spiritual problems. We need to work better possibly with churches instead of only secular organizations. Maybe some private charities and churches are better at helping these people solve their problems than what we've been doing so far. But not everybody should live here. A lot of these people are here because it's nice place to live, and there's not enough enforcement to keep them from loitering. So we need to have that enforcement. We also need to have better housing supply. We need, instead of subsidizing major developers that are profiting off of state subsidies to provide below market rent, killing the rental market, we need to encourage families to produce more housing through SB 9, ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and lot splits to create more housing, let the market adjust, and at least meet some of that demand, and possibly come up with some creative ways of dealing with this problem on their own. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
Homelessness is a countrywide issue. I do know that at the county level, there were approximately 1,500 people in 2019. We have a 5-year county plan. The first 2 years, I believe, is going toward data, collecting data with regard to the movement of people and the services needed. I can tell you right now that our Prado Center is overloaded. It's been described as a triage center. And it's very concerning that we can only currently house 20 to 30% of our homeless population right now in tiny homes off of Kansas Street. So we've got to find a long-term solution to this, and I believe working together with our neighbors is an important first step in doing that. And it's important to know that our city manager is also involved with that committee.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum.
Homelessness is endemic in California. In Morro Bay, we have 30 to 40 homeless people, and that's too many. But we're really lucky here. We have Sharon O'Leary, who is the city's director of Community Resource Connections, and she works really closely with EBAC and so many other outreach. There's a huge list of outreach organizations, and they keep the population really low. They work one-to-one contact, 24/7. She's always available for them. They're super strong case management, and that with our police department, who are really great too. And I think it's terrible that we have this situation. I would like to look into things such as safe parking. I think that might be something that we should look at, because there's a lot of families that live in their cars. You know, there's a lot of people that couch surf, and it's really shameful, and I think that we can do better.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson.
Yeah, the homelessness crisis here and all over the country is devastating. I have firsthand experience. When I was in grammar school, we were homeless, and we lived in the campground in San Simeon for about 6 months during winter. That was no fun, but we got through it, and we did use some government help, and I'm very grateful that was there for us. What I've looked into is AG has a successful program for pallet homes, and I think it's about 5 acres that the city of Arroyo Grande purchased, and they cost about $2,500 per pallet home. It gives the homeless a clean, safe environment, keeps everything contained, and if we could work together with the city and find an area to build possibly a small pallet home area for our 30 to 70 homeless people, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Heading.
Yes, going last, a lot of great comments, pardon me, that I'll echo. We have a wonderful police force that has gone through a lot of training in terms of dealing with our homeless population, and I think they do an excellent job. However, it does tax our police resources significantly to be able to have to deal with that. In addition, Ms. O'Leary is a gem, and means so much to the city in terms of dealing with the issues as they arise. But as I think Ms. Wixom said, the county compact that's certainly going on right now is a county-wide initiative that's looking at the root cause issues for homelessness, not just looking at housing individuals, but trying to identify the reasons why they're homeless, and then make resources available on a county-wide cooperative effort between the cities to deal with it. And I think from an economic and from a fairness standpoint and an appropriate use of resources, that is going to be the best way to approach it. And so our city manager is part of that group. They are moving fairly quickly to get the initiatives ready and available to the cities. More to follow soon with regard to that issue. But again, I think trying to just solve it locally is almost impossible without broad resource development across the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, this will go to Mr. Cordes first. Are you in favor of any development on the Morro Bay Greenbelt, Morro Bay Hillside, ?
Yes, I am in favor of development there. What I'm in favor of is more housing in Morro Bay. That doesn't mean that we need more single-family homes or sprawling mansions or anything like that. What we need are places where the workers in Morro Bay, where the young families in Morro Bay, where people can get their foothold and remain invested in the community. I think this is a great transition question from the question of homelessness, because how are we transitioning people back into society, or what is our role through evictions in putting people back out on the streets? I mean, we need to look at different ways to bring in more housing. I think one thing the council did recently, which I thought was a really good move, was to change the zoning for a particular lot. I don't believe it was the lot that we're referring to here on the Greenbelt, but to change the zoning on a particular lot to increase the density, because a developer may want to come in and develop, again, those mansions, when what we as a city know we need is less expensive housing for more people to be able to come and join our community. We have the water for it. We have the resources for it. We're not talking about increasing our population by 50%. We're talking about bringing in more housing for the people who already live here so that we don't have to lose them to homelessness.
Mr. Duringer.
Again, rather than seeing more large multifamily projects at below market rate rental that kills the normal healthy rental market, I'd rather see more reliance on SB 9 ADUs and lot splits to meet our housing needs. And we need to preserve our green belt areas so that we can have a more livable community attractive to tourists.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
Although I do agree that we do need ADUs, I don't know about the lot splits. That's another conversation. I do think it's interesting that David Duringer brought it up. I do think that we need fair market housing. I think that we have a tough time having what's considered affordable housing when you live by the coast of California. I think that we need to look at public benefit, community benefit, safety, and environmental impact when it comes to any area of town being developed or even being on the table for development. And again, I like to go back to also looking at circulation of our town. How are we going to move about here? And I think it would be very important for us to take a look at traffic flow before we do any sort of housing development. And as far as zoning, I do feel that near Bayside, where we moved from the low density to medium density, is something that needs to be considered if we are going to have any sort of housing here for our workforce, including our hospitality and restaurant workers and city staff even.
Thank you. Ms. Landrum.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Are you in favor of any development in the Morro Bay Greenbelt, Morro Bay Hillside?
Okay, the surrounding hills in Morro Bay is what I'm assuming that means. They're not green, though. And since they're not green, my first question is water. Where's the water for this? That's number one. It might be all you need. But also, if we had water, we would need to make sure that all environmental studies were done, the geology of the sites. I'm not sure where the question asker is talking about exactly, but there are some sites that have geological issues. And also the impact on roads, traffic, and other services in town. Is Morro Bay set up for a lot more developments? I'm not sure. That would all have to be looked at, I think. But for me, number one is water.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson.
I'm assuming this question has to do with a Panorama, the Tri-W, Bayside, the Chevron hillsides. We don't have water. It's a safety issue. These are landslide areas. It's been documented. We've already had landslides near the Panorama area, which has cost the city money. They've come into houses that are already on that hillside. If you look at the geological maps, which Cal Poly did do an extensive deal with that, and it happened at the wharf site already. We already had 2 slides on the first rain. So if we look at the history of the landslides here in Morro Bay and where they are proposing to build a number of homes, which we do need, but not in that area. It's very unsafe. I'm not for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading.
Well, thank you. It's a difficult question because it's not clear to me. So I'm going to make the assumption that by any development in the Morro Bay Greenbelt, that makes the assumption that it's outside of the current city limits. And I do not agree that we should be developing outside of the city limits. The current council is more into preservation of that area, and so I do not support that. With regard to any private property owner that is proposing a project to the city that is within the city limits, I think that has to go through the natural vetting process as it does, through CEQA, an EIR, through the appropriate planning review, planning commission review, public hearings, and then if there is a recommendation, and then city council review at that level. But again, I'm making the assumption that we're talking about areas outside of Morro Bay in the existing areas where we have basically promulgated our decision to not see that area developed. So I would.
Okay. Ms. Wixom.
Well, I'm going to do the opposite and go on the assumption that we're talking about greenbelt areas that are within our city limits or touching our city limits where the council has looked at annexations and where they've recently included some areas into the sphere of influence. While I support growth, we need to be responsive to the character of our town. That feeds into the quality of our life. I think size and scale of the projects is a lot. And each one of these greenbelt areas is very different. The neighbors out off of Panorama in that area, those hills slide. There's a lack of infrastructure to support the proposed project as it stands right now. The streets, you would add 120 cars a day on those streets. And that is neighborhoods you can barely pass through right now, not to mention the potholes. But it's unsafe for emergency services, and there is not the infrastructure for water and sewer out there. If we're talking about out by Seashell community, that's being looked at to change to high density, not medium, and it's not workforce housing, so it's not going to help potentially other than the dedicated 10% of required affordable housing, and that begs another question: what is affordable? As someone said earlier up here on the coast, circulation is a problem. All those things need to be factored in. This is supply and demand, so it's market-driven.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for crisp answers to the questions. We're not done yet, however, because now there will be closing statements according to the ground rules. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to give a closing statement. And the way we approach this is to go in reverse order of the opening statements. Ms. Robinson started with the opening statements, and we went clockwise. So, Ms. Landrum, you are going to be our first closing statement, and then we will go counterclockwise around the table. So, Ms. Landrum, 2 minutes, please.
Morro Bay is at a crossroads. Other cities up and down the coast of California, as well as cities in our own county, have grown before our eyes. While it may have begun slowly, more recently it has accelerated. It seemed Morro Bay might be immune, but here it is. My parents moved here in 1968, and it's been our family's home ever since. The stunning and accessible interface with nature has always been Morro Bay's greatest asset. In my lifetime, I've watched the city transition from a self-contained community with a thriving fishing industry and a relatively small carbon footprint to what it is now, primarily a tourism economy with retired residents. And now we find ourselves at that crossroads. Do we follow the cookie-cutter model of other cities, or do we capitalize on the fact that we are the holdout, the outlier, and use that to further set ourselves apart, to enhance and revere our sacred natural coastline? I'm here to say, let's not wait for huge corporations and opportunistic developers to make fast money off of our town. Let's lead the discussion and create our own unique version of Morro Bay into the future. There are major decisions to be made in Morro Bay, and with your vote, I promise to do my best to work with the council, staff, and more importantly, you, the community. And together, we can make the best decisions possible for Morro Bay. I ask for your vote on November 8th.
Thank you, Ms. Landrum. Ms. Edwards.
In closing, my family has been here for over 20 years. But I believe that it's what you do in your community and how you serve it that's important in determining leadership, not how long you've lived here. I've shown leadership in my work with the Morro Bay Merchants Association, with the Chamber of Commerce, running my own business, working with multiple mayors, city councils, and city managers. While on the campaign trail, I noticed a strong parallel between the business community that I've served and the greater community. Like the distinct districts of the business community, Morro Bay's community has distinct neighborhoods. And each one of those neighborhoods has different concerns and needs. And like most concerns and needs, they're based in the very elemental human level. It's water, safety, shelter, fiscal responsibility, and public benefit. No matter which one I was in, they were all the same. No matter what project was talked about, they were all the same. I'd like to assure you that whatever project comes along, big or small, your needs and concerns are going to be what's on my mind with every decision that's made. I assure you of that. I'd like the opportunity to continue the community dialogue that's been created. While I've been talking with all of you out there, I have really enjoyed it. I also would like to encourage all of you to get involved when it comes to development going on in the city and to stay involved, because that's really what's going to matter moving forward in the overall preservation of this small town that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Duringer.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me, Dave Duringer, in saying no to constitutional overreach. Say no to all the criminals, public and private, that rob you of your freedom at work, at home, and on the street. Say no to Vistra's battery storage that spreads pollution and depletes water supply that is obsolete because it makes us vulnerable to China. and will leave us holding the bag of batteries when we shift back to fossil fuels. That has a huge opportunity cost in terms of delayed development of Morro Bay's true theme, which is not industrial, and might even incinerate you. Say no to big developers who profit off state-subsidized low-income housing, possibly creating future ghettos here at the expense of Morro Bay families who can benefit from providing that housing. Say no to any new taxes until your government respects your rights. Contact me with any questions you have. Go to guntrust.org and take my free gun training, and then share that training with others. I have plenty of yard signs, but a little bit of gun training is required to get one. It takes just a few minutes and can even be done on your porch or driveway. I use this red gun here. It's just a hunk of plastic.
Please, we're almost done.
Lost my place. Together, we can be free again, we can be safe again, but for that, we must again be a people trained to bearing arms. That is the basis for the rule of law in this country, always has been, and the rule of law is the basis for wealth and family freedom. If we learned anything from the last several years of COVID fascism, it's that no one will say no for you. You must be prepared to say no to save your family in concert with your local sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
Thank you. I want to tell you guys a quick story, if you don't mind, from the last couple months as I've been campaigning. You may or may not know that the Planning Commission has just completed a massive overhaul of our zoning ordinances in town. This is one of the most important things that we do as a city, is look around and say, this is what can go here, this is what can go here. You want to talk about the character of our town? This is how we preserve it. That's hard work they did. So I'm at a Planning Commission meeting about 2 weeks ago, and a community member has read on Nextdoor that the commission meeting is happening. And the Nextdoor included a link to the updated zoning. And this citizen in our community took time out of her day to go and read through this. I mean, this is a dense report. It's taken a long time to produce. And she took time out of her day. And you know what? She saw something she didn't like. And she took time out of her evening. She came to the Planning Commission meeting, and she stood up there to give her feedback, and she was upset. And I thought that she composed herself well. She came up and she said, you have zoned the only low-income housing in our community, one of our mobile home parks, as a commercial location. That is going to get rid of one of the only low-income housing opportunities we have in town. This is a real great problem that she brought to them. And she, as many people do, she left after she made her statement. And then at the end of statements, the Planning Commission turned to the city planner and said, why did we change this? When did we change this? And the city planner said, no, it's been like this for decades. This is an oversight in our planning code. This story is an example of the the system working. After she left, within 10 minutes between the city planner and the Planning Commission, they had resolved this loophole. They had secured our zoning for low-income housing for decades in the future. By this one comment from one citizen who took time out of her day, we now can be confident that we're not going to be losing our low-income housing. So thank you, and I encourage you to all be involved in that same way.
Thank you. Ms. Wixom?
Thank you. I'd like to start again by thanking everyone who's helped organize this evening and facilitate the forum, and those of you who came out to listen to us. I want to recognize my husband and my family and thank them for their support. So, question, why do we live here? It's an easy answer, because we all love Morro Bay. We have more in common than not. If elected, I will devote my time and my energy to work with other members of the City Council and with you, the community, to address and balance the needs of the citizens and the visitors alike of our unique and special seaside town. I'd be honored to have your support, and I ask for your vote on or before November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heading?
Great. Thank everybody for being here this evening. Thanks to the League for your work this evening, the Chamber of Commerce, but thanks to these folks here for stepping up and actually moving forward to do something that I can tell you after 8 years is not an easy job. This is a small city. I ran initially in 2014. As I mentioned earlier, because of reading the 2008 Management Partners Report, it was a huge endeavor that the city had a consultant come in and look at, basically what was going to be soon the complete financial failure of the city because of the loss of revenue streams from the plant that closed. And over a period of years, there wasn't a lot done to change the financial status of the city to improve it. It's very difficult to make a small city like this work. You get to say yes to some things, like wouldn't it be great to be able to pave all of the roads to a PCI index of 80 and above? Wouldn't it be great to have employees that were all paid such that recruitment and retention wasn't a problem? Wouldn't it be great to not have a CalPERS liability of $27.1 million? It probably will increase by another $10 million this year because of lack of financial returns. It's a difficult job. I can tell you that from experience, and I promise you I will continue to listen to your voices, balance my decisions, but sometimes listening doesn't mean that as a council member I don't hear you or we don't hear you. It's just that there are also other voices that are heard. We may not agree with what your opinion is and try to do the best that we can for the overall success of the city. So I'm asking for your vote on November the 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson.
I also want to say thank you to everyone who is here this evening and who is out in the sphere of Zoom or however this is being dealt with. The overall issues as I see them are open government, money management, which involves the protection of public funds, how to deal with much needed housing, and protection of the natural environment, mostly the national estuary and our drinking water sources. If I could make changes in these areas, they would include, 1, making sure that all the public's business is done in a way that the public has input. For example, some of the most important decisions are made as business contracts instead of as public hearings for public involvement. 2, making sure that the new housing developments include multifamily units as well as single family, and that the city has the tools to require this. And 3, making absolutely sure that operations of the new sewage treatment plant and the sewer pipelines will not cause harm to the estuary. If anyone has any further questions for me, please feel free to contact me by email, and you can find our flyer in the lobby. The reason I am here tonight is to represent you, the residents of Morro Bay, your needs, your vision for our treasured community. I want to speak on your behalf, not what I want, but what we want for our future. Thank you for your time and your vote. Have a great night.
Thank you. Now we've completed the forum this evening, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to express our appreciation, everyone's appreciation, I think, to the Morro Bay Chamber of Commerce and Erica Crawford, who's here, has been helping out back in the back and organized this thing for us, and the volunteers, over a dozen volunteers at the League of Women Voters who have been here trying to help facilitate this forum. Very important to thank the audience, the voters, the people who came and spent their evening here. This has been a very civil and thoughtful evening of questions and listening, active listening. This is wonderful in a polarized, passionate environment that we're all in now. I think this is a prime example of what should be happening in this country, civil discourse and listening. Finally, we would like to thank the candidates who have put themselves out there in front of the public for a lot of tough questions and have given crisp and thoughtful answers, and I think we should all give them a round of applause. And final message from the League of Women Voters, get out and vote.